Everybody. Welcome to Autism Awareness Australia's webinar today. My name is Nicole Rogerson. I'm the CEO of Autism Awareness Australia. Welcome to our webinar. This is a monthly series, but this particular month is dedicated to the early years. So we're focusing on younger children with autism. So hopefully you've clicked on the right webinar for today. Firstly, before we go anywhere else, I'd love to acknowledge our sponsor, which is Leap In. This webinar series is proudly supported by Leap In. They're Australia's leading NDIS plan manager, supporting thousands of Australians with disability across the country, very much driven to be able to help people get the most out of their NDIS plans. And I know that is extremely needed by a lot of people. So we're incredibly grateful for Leap In for making this series possible. Now, I want to introduce our speakers for today. First and foremost, I would like to welcome Sue Marden, who is a well-known Sydney speech pathologist who I have been roping into all sorts of jobs to help out at Autism Awareness for many years. It says she has only 40 years of experience, which is interesting because she's younger than 40, in both the public and private clinics, and she specialises in working with children with autism, and she runs an amazing multidisciplinary team here in Sydney. And Leslie, welcome to Leslie, who is on staff with, notice how, Leslie, I'm glossing over pronouncing your last name.
Yes.
So I'm just going to own it. Leslie, how do I say it?
Canalopoulos.
Canalopoulos. How rude am I not to have practiced that with you like a million times yesterday?
That's
right. So Leslie is a speech pathologist who works with Sue, and she specialises in working with children with autism, obviously, but also with a particular interest in using AACs, or augmentative and alternative communication systems, to support non-verbal children. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think today it's a really important point to note that we're going to be talking about speech. But when we talk about speech, we don't always just mean words. Obviously, there's all different types of communication, and we're going to be talking about all of those different things today. So if you're joining the webinar and your little one is pre-verbal and doesn't necessarily have a lot of speech at the moment, that's okay. We're going to be covering off some topics that will be relevant to you today. So thank you, ladies. Now, I wanted to kick off with my first question, and is, speech pathologists are often the first port of call where a parent will go if they're concerned about their child's delay. So oftentimes for children with autism spectrum disorder, one of the earliest signs will be lack of or delayed speech. You guys are often the front line. You'll be the place that parents go before they might even be thinking about the A word or something else. How do speechies navigate that with parents who might be feeling a bit nervous?
You're correct. We often are the front line, the first step that families will go to. Look, the first thing we want to do as speechies is that we want to just get to know the child, understand the history from the parents, and get a sense of whether this actually could be autism. So that's our first step. We need to do a little bit of investigation. The next thing that we're then going to do is that we're just going to start asking the parents if they notice certain things. We might say to a family, look, I've noticed that, when Leslie plays with her toys, she lines them up, or, she plays with the dollies in the same way every time. Tell me what happens at home. Describe to me what happens at home. So we start, exploring those sorts of questions, those sorts of ideas. But at some point in time, we actually need to raise autism, because the gold standard of diagnosis is that you must raise it as speech pathologists. That depends on the parent. Some parents, we are able to have a very open discussion very early. Other parents, we have to take time. Other parents are very vulnerable. And if we start asking and putting words like autism into the discussion, it's going to just raise anxiety. And occasionally a family will leave if you start raising that. So we base that very much on the parent's journey. But also at the same time, we would never let a family go off knowing they have an assessment with the developmental paediatrician, and we might think it's autism and we haven't said anything, and they're blindsided at an assessment. So we match it to the parents and to their journey at the time, but we always raise it. And we have quite a number of families in the clinic that we've raised it with. They don't want to know about the word autism. They don't want to do an assessment, but they do all the intervention.
And so sometimes you're gauging what a family feels. It feels like at this point, it's a little less about the child and a little bit more about the parents.
In the
Yeah.
beginning, I would say
Yeah.
it's very much, it's about us understanding where the child's at. So with the child, it's where is the child at? Do we think this could possibly be autism? And then it's like, where are the parents at? What are they thinking? How's all that going? They're the two most important things.
And it is important that parents know they don't have to wait for that label or that assessment or whatever that outcome
Oh, yeah.
is. They can keep coming to you, yeah?
Absolutely. They don't have to. They don't have to have a diagnosis. They don't have to have a referral. They can even apply for NDIS funding just based on seeing a speech pathologist. They don't have to have a diagnosis. So that's important that parents understand that. We are here to help their child and to help them help their child, regardless of what the diagnosis is or whether they have one.
All right. So they've come to see you and it's there in the name, speech pathologist, right? Because mostly parents are really worried about the speech. That tends to be the thing that freaks parents out the most. Parents also think, I know this because I might have been one of them, that if the speech or the talking would just come in, we're all good here. Like it's fine. Like speech is all we needed. Once we've got speech, we're going to be fine. How do you guys navigate that when working with the parents?
With parents, it is very much the case that they think once the child talks, then everything is going to move forward. It is about education. So development and autism is not about communication. Talking does not exist on its own. There are so many other developmental areas that support it. Social engagement, imitation, play, even cognitive ability. That all has to come together, because if all of that comes together and the child builds up all those skills in those areas, the communication, whether it's talking or not, will come. Whereas if a child has some communication, some verbal communication, lacks all the other areas, then the communication is going to be severely compromised. So we have to educate the parents about all of those different areas and how they need to come together. And in particular, play. Play is one of those things that we have to talk about a lot. Communication is dependent on play. They both work together. Without play, you have limited communication. With more play, you get more communication.
So play is a real strategy there.
Play is critical.
Especially, yeah, in the early years.
When children are very young.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What if a parent says, look, I don't know, my child doesn't know how to play. They don't have the play skills. They're not demonstrating any of those skills. Does that mean there's nothing you can do?
Oh, absolutely not.
We teach them play.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for speech pathologists to help children learn to play, and with their interests as well, and guiding them on, okay, these are other things that you can do with play, and all the language that comes around with developing play skills.
And sometimes you have to teach the parents how to play?
Yeah.
But remember, being fair to the parents, they have often tried to play with their children, but it is harder to play with their children. They've tried often for years before we see them, and they've failed because their child has got unique challenges. So we teach the parents to understand those unique challenges. We teach them new strategies to engage their child and actually teach their child to play.
So, okay, that's kind of one of my questions. I'm just going to ask you what the strategies are if the child is pre-verbal, but it sounds like they're going to be very similar, whether the child's pre-verbal or whether they've got some single words or some short sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the early part is actually teaching engagement, so that the child is actually responding to people. They're looking at people. They're taking turns, whether they're just making sounds or blowing bubbles or playing with the toy. There are a lot of very early engagement skills. So whether the child is 2 or the child is 5, we're often teaching engagement to support everything else.
Okay, so what do we do about the quality of the speech? What if a child's got a few words, maybe, but they're not great, or they don't sound great? I presume what we're trying to do here is promote even bad sounds rather than worrying about overly correcting. Is that sort of a strategy as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you want to be building a large vocabulary so that they're using lots of word approximations before you even start targeting, the clarity of the sounds and the words. If they're using consistent words in the same context, people around them and their communication partners are going to, pick up on, when they say this word, this is what that means. And you're then constantly providing that clear model for them.
And is requesting kind of the first port of call? Is that going to, or you're really saying the better communication, the better speech to start is through play, but is it also through requesting because you're able to give the child something back for the approximation that they're making?
We're looking really from two perspectives. We're looking at it from the play, so using it in play routines, but also using it in daily routines. And requesting is a really big part of a daily routine. So yes, requesting is a very early part of it because we want the parents and the child to be learning things in play and in daily routines, because the parents still have to get through the bathing and the eating and the driving to preschool.
Yeah, no, understandable.
Yeah.
And those approximations, I mean, how do you do that thing where child says word, you want to give them the thing, right? They say ball, you want to give them the ball pretty quick, right? So that they get that reward. What do you do in the case of the child that's really good for asking for a cookie or something that it's fine if they have it, obviously, but at some point we probably don't want to give them diabetes. Where does the request, you know what I mean?
Well, that's tricky. I guess you just have to you just have to say sometimes there's no cookies. We can try this instead. You have to have something else. You have to know what interests the child, what the child's preferred interests are. Yes, if you're trying to get some very specific communication and cookie can be part of teaching some new strategies, use the cookies for that. But if you've developed other play and you've explored the child's other interests, you usually have quite a few options.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so when it comes to speech, parents often ask a lot about echolalia. Can you explain to the layperson what echolalia is and then what a parent does about it? Because it sounds good.
There's two different types of echolalia. You have an immediate echolalia where the child repeats it straight away. And then you have a delayed echolalia where a child repeats the language later. It could be, hours later, days later, weeks later. They might repeat it several times a day. Echolalia can be functional, and it often helps the child to request something, express something about their environment, or sometimes just buy time to process information. It's a bit of a receptive language tool that they're using. But it can also be, not very functional in terms of they may sound repetitive or out of context, but it still serves that internal role of whether the child is trying to self-soothe or they're rehearsing language.
And they are still practicing speech, right? So you don't, as the parent, even if it's not functional, you don't want to necessarily shut it down.
No, it's not inherently negative at all. And in fact, there are strategies that you can learn that you can actually take that echolalia, whether it's delayed or immediate, to use it to expand language. So it's not bad.
So that probably segues into my next question, which is a cousin of echolalia being scripting, which is it's less repetitive, but it's fair to say that the scripting is repeating a whole chunk of something.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly the same thing with scripting. Scripting can be very useful, and you can actually, if you know how to use certain strategies with scripting, you can actually build much more flexible language out of the script.
So again, should parents be worried that, the scripting is kind of their obsession with
No.
Toy Story, or I'll have to use a more modern version, Moana or something like that. I just dated myself with Toy Story, by the way.
Completely nuttly.
But I mean, so for the parents sitting there worrying, oh my God, my child is talking, but they're scripting lines out of their favorite Disney shows. Can they be calm about that?
They can be calm, but what they should have is, from this speech pathologist, they should have strategies. As Leslie said, some kids are using echolalia and scripting to calm, in which case you don't interfere with it. If it's a calming strategy, let them self-regulate. If it's not a calming strategy, then as long as they begin to learn some of the strategies, and if you've got a child, let's go back to Toy Story, who's talking about Woody the whole time and saying the same thing, then you're going to be using certain strategies to build on that, and then you would include it in play and you expand on it. So you'd be a more flexible language.
And what if a child uses the script and it's not wrong? Like I seem to remember my son, when he wanted you to stop doing something, he'd use a line out of Star Wars that was, Emperor, stop doing blah, blah, blah. It was right. The topic was right, even if it was 100% borrowed from a movie. And that's okay.
It's okay, but
Yeah.
what I would do is that I would try and teach them replacement language or more
You
flexible
start
language.
building upon that language and like slowly changing some words in that script, and you're just modeling it and rephrasing it back to them. But again, the child's speech pathologist should be able to, you know, guide you on like the specific strategies at the specific times.
Okay, so speech we know, incredibly important. Parents over-index it on it's the most important thing going on with my child's development, and it may or may not be. But is the lack of speech often the thing that's behind some of the behavioural challenges kids with autism sometimes have? And parents probably also think, I think the behavioural thing would be sorted if the speech thing was sorted.
They often think that, and communication plays a role in behavioural difficulties. There's no doubt about that. But very often it's that you need behavioural strategies to manage the behaviour, as opposed to trying to just focus on building more language. You know, there are plenty of verbal children on the autism spectrum who have loads of behavioural challenges.
Yeah.
And certainly non-verbal children, you can do behavioural intervention strategies with non-verbal children and reduce the behaviour even though they're non-verbal.
Yeah, so they're really just not related.
A little bit.
It
but
depends on the reason for the behavior. You know, are they do they have a behavior because they're frustrated that they can't communicate, or, you know, are they frustrated that they didn't get their way? Like, depends on the reason.
All right, well, then that segues a little bit in the question I'm going to ask you, Leslie, about the AAC devices.
Yeah.
I remember over the years of knowing parents who are really worried about introducing an augmented communication system because they're worried that it will get in the way of the speech developing, which kind of sounds crazy, but I can understand it. It's almost like, oh, we'll implement this system so that my child doesn't have to talk or won't talk. Can you rebuff that, or is there some merit to that thinking?
No, so I mean, I can understand where parents come from when they do have those concerns, but the research does tell us that implementing AAC in children who are nonverbal or are minimally verbal does help with their verbal language. What you're trying to develop and build on is their communication, and in whatever form that you can build it in. You know, there are lots of different AAC options, and kids will will gravitate towards different ones. And it's to build, you know, them wanting to communicate and communicate with a range of different people.
So it's got to be meaningful for them, right? So if they're using a device, it has to be full of the information that they're going to be able to navigate it, right?
It has to be personalized to them.
And I take it's also pretty important that everybody else in the family and extended family knows how to use that device.
And daycare centre.
We find there is better success when it is AAC is implemented in all areas. So whether that is daycare, preschool, at home, wherever they go, the device goes with them.
Yeah, so you might need to train Nana and Grandpa up.
Yeah. If they would like to be.
I'm surprised sometimes. We have some children, so I mean, AAC has come a long way. So some of the apps that we use in the clinic are Proloquo to go. There's LAMP. Yeah. We also use gestures. We also use visuals. There's all kinds of things like that. We have one little boy whose mum was not keen on AAC. She said, no, I didn't want it for months and months and months. He is completely nonverbal. He makes some sounds to communicate and sort of uses his body to communicate. He can press a 3-word phrase on his LAMP device to communicate.
That is amazing.
And one day in a session, he was pressing, when he was first learning to use it, and he was pressing more something or other, I can't remember. And he pressed more drink, and I thought he had actually pressed the wrong button. And then he pressed, I want more drink, and he actually wanted a drink of water. And this is a fully nonverbal child.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's helping communication. And then if it helps communication, somebody's just asked for some specifics, but my team who are here somewhere in the background will no doubt be putting links to LAMP and Proloquo in the chat.
LAMP, there's Proloquo to go. There is PECS back in the day, which some kids respond to. Yeah. But, you know, AAC has moved on quite a bit from PECS, but we've got a girl that we both see who's on PECS at the moment. Gestures are a form of alternative communication. Visual schedules are a form of alternative communication.
And I guess it's also a really important point at this point to throw in that there's quite a bit of science behind PECs, and there's a lot of evidence here. We're not talking about something silly here. There's a lot of evidence to show that this is effective.
Yep.
Yeah, and parents can be okay with it because, I mean, children who have used augmentative systems that then go on to still gain speech, yes?
Yeah, I have a kid who we were doing prolo with, and he became really good on prolo, quicker than any of us. And he got to, I think, kindergarten, and he started talking. And he didn't want to use his device anymore, and that was fine.
Yeah.
Because he was completely verbal. So what you're providing is like a toolbox of communication. You want to give them everything that they can use at any given moment to communicate, because sometimes environments can be overwhelming and then they don't want to use their verbal words. They don't want to use their mouth words. So they can use something else.
Yeah, great question. And before we move on, somebody's asking us to clarify, and I think that it would probably be helpful to quite a few people. What's the difference between non-verbal and non-speaking and non-voice speaking? And I'm using an old term, pre-verbal, but I don't know if that's aging me as well. What are the difference between all of those things?
Non-verbal means that the child is not using words. Would you agree? Because some people do, this varies. But you may not be using words to communicate, but you could be using sounds. Or you could be using gestures. You could be pointing. You could be waving. You could be taking somebody's hand. So I would say that, generally speaking, non-verbal is that the child does not have words.
Yeah.
Non-vocal, I think they've written non-voice.
Yeah, non-voice speaking.
Yeah, they're sort of non-vocal and non-voice. That means that the child is not even using any sounds to communicate.
Okay.
So plenty of our children who are non-verbal, in that they do not have words, will use sounds to communicate, and they can do that quite effectively. I'm assuming by non-voice, it's not a term we tend to use. It means that they haven't got sounds to communicate.
And non-verbal also doesn't mean non-verbal forever. It's non-verbal at the moment.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the oldest child I have ever had learn to talk, funnily enough, with PECs, at the age of 10. And he had no words before that at all. And in the space of 6 weeks, he was on 4 and 5 word sentences.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Amazing. All right, here's a question for you that's more of a practical one. In a report that we recently did, which was a national parent and carer survey, we found that most parents of young children reported that they were getting 1 to 2 hours a week of therapy. Might be 1 hour with a speech pathologist, 1 hour with an occupational therapist. That doesn't feel like a lot, but what's the right amount? What's the right amount of therapy and I know there's no answer to that because we're talking about children with autism present in so many different ways, and there's no one simple answer for all of those ways. But what do you typically tell parents about the dosage of speech pathology they need in their lives, in their child's life?
Okay. It is dependent on so many different things. And these days it's often dependent on the child's NDIS plan. How much funding they actually have available.
Okay, you just depressed me, but
okay. Sorry.
Okay, park funding for a second. Pretend money grows on the tree.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, okay. Pretend that funding is not an issue. Okay, back in our day, Nicole, there used to be this concept of, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week, whatever that might be. The research has now proven that is not the correct way to go about it. So you need to look at the child. You need to work out where their deficits are, what you need to build up. You need to look at how trainable the parents are. Can you train that parent? Are they in a space where they can take on strategies at home? Because what we do know is that parents can actually be trained to do therapy like a therapist in a clinic. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. For my families in our clinic here, if they can come between 2 or 3 hours a week, every child improves.
Yeah, brilliant. But that is great, but also that trainable parent part is really important. And if it can't be the parent, can it be the grandparent? Can it be? It's just training the people in the child's life.
Exactly.
Various different people before.
A preschool teacher, support workers.
Yeah, a really good one. The
Siblings, even siblings.
So a good speech pathologist is somebody who knows how to hand over the tools of their craft.
Yeah, knows how to train to hand over. Because training other people who are not speech pathologists, they haven't gone to university for 4 years, knowing how to train and systematically teach early skills, build them up, give feedback to the parents, to actually have a parent working in front of you and giving them the right kind of feedback, that's a real skill. So that it makes a difference and also builds the parent's confidence as well. Then they should be able to do that. A good speech pathologist will know how to train a parent.
And by extension there, would that also be a grandparent or other people? Because you find that there are so many people in a child's life who want to contribute. They just don't know how to. Or maybe it's the idea that the speech pathologist has the secret sauce and they're going to know what to do and I can't be that professional.
Yeah, but we don't have any secret sauce. In fact, it is so much better if you can train a parent, a grandparent, a daycare worker, because some of our children are at daycare 4 days a week, than coming in and seeing me for 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
It really is so much better. I think both is even better. Some individualized therapy with a qualified speech pathologist and the training. That's the ideal combination.
It sounds to me that the child does better when we've got practice, practice, practice.
Absolutely. Yep.
And practice in their daily routines.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really meaningful to them.
Yeah. It's meaningful. It happens every day. It's routine based.
Because then you get to practice it a lot, right?
Yeah. And it's predictable. If it's predictable, they're more likely to learn it.
Okay. Now, what are some of the common misconceptions about speech development in autistic children? Are they kind of misconceptions that you'd like to debunk?
Oh, you bet. Biggest thing I would like to debunk, and this is not just parents I'm debunking, it's also a lot of doctors, okay? I'm sorry if there's any pediatricians watching. Do not judge a child's intellectual ability based on their communication skills because you're going to be wrong. That would be my biggest one.
That was mic drop level. Don't do it, pediatrician listening. But people do that, right? There's this assumption that this lack of speech has more of an impact on the child than is necessarily there.
I did it once and I got it so wrong. I worked with this now man in his 20s and I thought he had really poor intellectual ability. He started to sort of talk at about the age of 12. I referred him another speech pathologist who uses a particular approach that I think he needed at the time. I caught up with her last year. He is typing in full sentences. Am I always going to live at home and will I ever be in a relationship? And I had a severe intellectual disability. So I got it wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Big lesson.
Big lesson. What I love about what I'm hearing from you ladies today, and I hope parents take it this way, but I love it that you're explaining that a lot can happen by empowering the parent to do more. And that's not a job like give the parent another job. No. It actually just means you get to have a role in this outcome. That sounds pretty exciting.
It is. And the parents are actually still caring for their children all day. They want to know what to do when they're changing that nappy, when they're feeding the child. It's not as if you're giving them an extra job to do things that they're not already doing. They are. But by skilling them up, you can have a huge change with parents.
And what happens to the parent who they're very young child, they're a little bit nervous, and somebody says, "Oh, I think you should go and see a speech pathologist," but they're hoping like hell there's nothing wrong. So they're nervous about going to see you. They're nervous about calling Sue's number and saying, "Can I have an appointment?" Can it ever be too early to start speech pathology with a child?
No, never. And we have some families who are concerned about something. They come and we say they're actually okay. And we explain why they're okay, because there is quite a range of development in terms of, when children meet milestones when they're younger. It's never too early. And you are so much better off going and asking somebody who tells you, don't worry, or yes, we need to go further, than waiting. And especially one of those dreadful myths is that, well, Einstein didn't talk till he was 3 years old anyhow.
I personally would like to punch everybody that says that still all these years later. Yep. Not that we advocate for violence at Autism Awareness. But by the way, who was around when Einstein was a child anyway? So stop that nonsense. Ladies, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day, because I can see those seats behind you should be filled with people that you're actually helping children as opposed to coming onto this webinar and helping us. But I think you've given our families some really good basic understanding of speech pathology now that I know you guys don't have a special secret sauce.
We don't. Wish we did. Yeah, we don't.
But it also sounds like a really good speech pathologist is happy to own that and hand over those good strategies so that parents have got something to go home and do, yeah?
You do want to find a really good speech pathologist that you trust, because they can guide you and they can guide your child and work with you and work with your child. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Ladies, I can't thank you enough. I will let you get back to the children that you are helping, and thank you very much for the work that you do. And I thank everybody very much for joining us here today at Autism Awareness's webinar. Now, I'm supposed to mention, Marlene gives me a list of things to do, I mentioned that this recording will be sent to people who registered to it in a couple of days. So if you couldn't listen to all of it, or you know somebody who might benefit from listening to this, please feel free to forward it. It will eventually live on our Autism Awareness website, but I encourage you to go to our website anyway, because we have more free evidence-based resources there that will dig down even further into speech. It's quite a massive one. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because there'll be other webinars that you may have missed in the series that will come around again. So if you subscribe there, you'll get it. But again, thank you to Leap In, the plan managers, because without them, this would not be possible. So we're terribly, terribly grateful for everyone to take their time. I hope today's been really useful. And Sue, Leslie, can't thank you enough, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole.
No worries. Bye, everybody.
Bye.